Factoring company. So what is a factoring company? To put it simply, a factoring company is just a company that buys debt from other businesses at a discounted rate and then pursues the payee for the total amount that was agreed upon between the payee and the original carrier or company that issued that credit. So before I get into why a carrier or a company or even a brokerage would want to use a factoring company, let me give you two examples of how this would work in the real world. All right, so the first example is going to be that you are a carrier and you see a load that is posted up by a broker. Now you're already in contract with a factoring company, which we can talk about in just a little bit at the end of this video. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to run credit on that broker. So you'll go onto your factoring company's website. Most of them have portals for whoever their carriers are so that they can run credit on those brokers and say, hey, is this broker approved for credit? Yes or no? How much, how much is still outstanding? For example, if that broker had a credit limit of, let's say, $10,000 with that factoring company, but they're already using up $9,000 of it with other carriers, right, that haven't been paid out yet, that means they only have $1,000 left on their credit limit, and so this one's going to get denied because it's $2,000. Let's pretend like it is accepted and the credit limit is higher, whatever the case may be, but that broker is good to go. The factoring company will factor that invoice. Here's what happens. The carrier will do the run for the $2,000 and then they will have a rate con and a POD or a BOL that's signed, right? And so they will take that proof of delivery and the rate con over to their factoring company and say, hey, I did this run, everything came off clean, I need to get paid today or tomorrow. It's really, really fast. That's the whole point of this. The factoring company will take those, they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, we are going to buy this from you and we're going to give you 97%. That means that they take a 3% fee for waiting to collect on the payee or on the broker. So what happens then is the factoring company will send a notice of assignment, also known as an NOA, to the broker saying, hey, you are not going to pay this carrier anymore. All the debt on this load, everything that you owe is going to come to us, and it will have all the payment details. Again, that's a notice of assignment. So then when the broker actually does go to pay the load, they have to pay that factoring company and not the carrier. That's how it works. All right, so example number 2. Now this is going to be a broker using a factoring company for their customers. So one thing that you got to understand is brokers extend terms to customers for payment that are much further out sometimes than what carriers extend to brokers. So it could be 30 days, regular net 30. It could be 60, could be 90 or more. It just depends on what they agree and what they feel comfortable doing. Now, if they aren't unable to extend them 60 or 90-day terms, then they can go to a factoring company and say, hey, I have a customer that pays extremely slow in this case. Go ahead and run their credit, see if it's somebody that you would be willing to factor for 60 or 90 days and tell me what the percentage would be. Now, it doesn't always have to be like this. Maybe it's just a new brokerage and they factor everything, even 30 days, so that they can grow faster. My point being is the factoring company then would work with the broker to run credit on their customers and then determine on whether or not they were going to extend credit, not to the broker, but to those specific customers, just like it happens with the carrier, right? They're not extending credit to the carrier, they're extending credit to the brokers for the carrier because the debt they're buying doesn't belong to the carrier. The debt actually belongs to the broker. So that is something the broker has to pay. That is their debt. All right, so now back to the broker example. The broker would give the information to the factoring company on their potential customer. And so the factoring company would then run their credit and give them a yay or nay on whether they're willing to work with them. And if so, how much credit they're willing to extend. All right, so what are the benefits of using a factoring company? Well, first off, it's going to be speed of payment. Obviously, you get paid in 1 or 2 days. And quick note, I just want to tell you guys, it's not just brokers and carriers that use factoring companies. Factoring is very common in any type of business. So just know that. The decision on whether or not to extend credit to a brokerage is much easier for a factoring company if that factoring company has worked with the brokerage in the past. Whereas a carrier that has maybe 1 or up to 10 or whatever, just a few trucks, maybe has never even heard of this brokerage. And so now it is a much higher risk. Am I going to get paid? How comfortable do I feel extending that credit? Well, if I go through a factoring company and they approve this broker, right? If they look at it and say, hey, this broker's good, we're willing to buy that invoice, that makes me feel much better whether I'm on recourse or non-recourse. All right, so now let's talk about it. What is recourse and non-recourse? So if a broker or the end customer, whoever it is that is actually going to be the payee, if the payee does not pay the factoring company and the factoring company comes back to the carrier and deducts that money, then that is recourse factoring. Non-recourse means that the invoice is being sold to the factoring company and there is no recourse if the payee does not pay the factoring company. So let me simplify this just a little bit more. Non-recourse means that the carrier is not going to get any chargebacks no matter if the end payee pays the factoring company or not. Recourse means that they are still on the hook, even though the company, the factoring company, approved the customer or the broker for X amount of credit. It still is the responsibility of the carrier to pay back that factoring company, and they will take it out of any of the other loads that they owe you. So that is extremely important for a carrier or a broker to make that decision on whether or not they want to use factoring companies and whether or not they want recourse or non-recourse. And the final reason is going to be consolidating all of your income from one place. So if you are a carrier, for example, and you work with a ton of different brokerages, and every single time you take a load, you're having to do quick pay forms, get set up, go through accounting, it's a bunch of emails, a bunch of verifying, making sure that you're getting paid on time, it is a hassle. So instead, you could just go to a factoring company and say, hey, I'm going to factor all of my stuff through you, and let's work out a deal, right? And that's what they do, and then they collect from the payees. So I will tell you, it is a big job. It depends on how many trucks you have. It also depends if you're a brokerage, how many loads that you're doing. But if you are constantly doing AR, you're out there just trying to find out where your money is that is supposed to come in, accounts receivable, AR, then that's a full-time, that's a collections job. And so if something goes past due from a factoring company, the factoring company isn't going to hit you with chargebacks on day one. They're going to have their team, their specialists, their account holders reach out to the payees and say, hey, you're past due, please, let me get a payment status. When is this going to be coming in? Okay, second notice, when is this coming in? And they will try to get that money themselves. And that's somebody that is not doing it in your office, right? And so that saves the carrier time or the broker time, and it definitely is a big help. Now, something that you should be aware of though, any carrier or broker looking to use factoring has to be aware of the terms and conditions inside of a factoring contract. Most of them, the ones I know of, will make you factor every single load that you do. And so that's part of the contract. They want all the volume that you're going to produce. So any loads you do have to be run through them. That is part of the contract. Not all carriers or brokers will find that very appealing, but it is something to know, and that's factoring.